Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Uche Njoku, Sneaker Principal. And in this episode of the Sneaker Principal podcast, I'm going to tackle a question that most of you probably have never heard. And if you've heard it, it's been in the backstages, dark corners. And that question is, why are principals the most fearful educators that you'll meet in our public school system? Yeah, I'm probably going to get fired for this one. But it's a question that needs to be answered because so many principals come into this profession of ours and they're so hopeful, and before you know it, they're gone. And this is not just about fear with school principals, it's really about fear with leaders. Because I'm sure that there are several professions out there in which you have leaders that function driven by fear on a daily basis. And just imagine the impact that that has not only on themselves, but their organizations. There's this myth that fear is a powerful motivator. And I don't think so. So in this episode, we're going to dig a little deeper and tackle this question about fear in leadership, specifically from my vantage point as a public school principal.
And now he's been promoted. His job, principal.
So let me paint you a picture. Your alarm goes off in the morning, and the first thing you do is pick up your cell phone because it's sitting right there next to your bed. And you're looking for emails. You're looking for messages that came to you in the middle of the night. Because just a few hours ago, you were looking at your emails before you went to sleep. Because you've been indoctrinated into this culture of believing that you can never unplug. There's always going to be that message that can come at any point from a parent, from the district, from central office, from somewhere that puts your whole entire career in jeopardy. So you're always vigilant, you're always on the lookout. And this is how you start your day. Think about that. You don't even have to be a school principal. In your profession, if you are in leadership, if you're leading an organization, it might be a team of 10, it might be a team of 100, it might be teams of thousands. Do you relate or can you relate to that feeling? So, why would you want this job? Would you want this job? And again, one thing I want to make clear, I'm speaking from the perspective of a school principal, which I've been doing now for well over 8 years, 3 different schools, 3 different districts, assistant principal for just about the same amount of time across 2 different states, then a dean of students across 3 schools. All leadership roles, even though I'm talking about being a principal, but all leadership roles that require a certain level of vigilance. Why would you want this job? Better yet, do me a favor. In the comments, share with me. What are your thoughts? Are you in that position? How do you handle it? Or are you exploring opportunities in leadership? If you're in education, you want to become a teacher leader, you want to become an assistant principal, or you might be looking towards becoming a principal, or you might be in another field where you're looking at towards management, or it might be in the private sector, it might be in the public sector. Why do you want that? And is this a fear of yours? And if you're already in that position, share with us your experience. How are you handling it? Look, there's a reason that when you meet school principals, often you see this either stressed out look on their face, And if it's not a stressed out look, it's this pensive, lip biting, these deep breaths, or in some cases, shallow breaths, this facade of everything's under control, but something is off. Let me share a story for you. I remember being a first year principal, and I made a decision, have to do with a parent, and I believe I made the right decision. I'm not going to share the story in detail because, again, I don't want to have that parent. But that parent would, if they ever saw this, they would know exactly it was them. But something happened. I had to address it. But the way I addressed it had to be stern. I had to put my foot down, and I would not budge on this particular situation. There was a very clear policy that was in place and was violated. As a result, their child had to suffer the consequences of this violation. And it wasn't one of those like, I'm just being, hard on a kid just to be hard on a kid. It was a very serious matter, you know, and there was no black and white. I mean, sorry, there was no gray area. It was very, very black and white. As a matter of fact, my decision um, actually benefited the child because if I had followed through with steps that other people would have taken, this child would have been locked up, would have been in prison. Let me take that back. That's kind of harsh. Not necessarily in prison, but they would have been facing the youth justice system. But however, there was an opportunity there for me to make a decision that benefited everyone. But the decision also required consequences that the parent thought was really harsh. And my stance was my decision actually would benefit the young man in the long run. But of course, the parent went into this whole entire tirade of who they were going to call from the chancellor's office, superintendent, the local paper. They were going to have the whole entire family out in front of my school protesting. And even though I am pretty confident in who I am as a leader, I was a little shook. I remember that night laying in my bed saying, did I make the right decision? Should I have been like some of my colleagues and just sweep it under the rug? Should I have not even, should I have just followed through with what I was going to do and still allow this young man to participate in events that legally, according to the policies that was agreed upon, that he had forfeited by his actions? And that night I didn't sleep because I was waiting for the phone call, for that email, for that text message. And I will tell you, I hated every moment of it. Situations like that, for a lot of school leaders, becomes an Achilles heel. Because especially if the outcome is one where you're not supported and then you get in trouble, and now you find yourself in a position where you're like, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. So now I have to be very cautious because I want to not get fired. I want to not be written up. I want to be able to work long enough to get my pension. So what happens now is when anything happens in your school, you take the path of caution to protect yourself or to protect your school, which when what you're really doing is in a roundabout way protecting yourself. And anything that comes up, you take the path of least resistance. You make decisions that are really aligned with you, um, minimizing any kind of heat that might come your way. And it's something that a lot of leaders do all the time. It's not just education. It's not just being a principal. It's in the military. It's in hospitals. It's in law firms. It's in McDonald's. It's like anywhere where You have someone who's been asked to step into a leadership role, and once they've been burned, or or even in most cases you're not even burnt, nothing even happens, but you're so afraid that you just say, you know what, it's not worth it. And you don't know how many times I've heard from school leaders, from colleagues of mine who've said it's not worth it. So what happens when innovative and amazing ideas come their way? They're always looking for the negative. What can go wrong? And they tend to lean on the side of caution and say, you know what, maybe not this year, maybe next time. And that becomes the standard by which they lead their schools, or they lead their companies, or they lead their organizations, or they lead their teams. So think about your workplace. Have you ever seen that happen before? People who've become paralyzed to the point where they're not willing to take risks. It's not even risks, it's make the right decision, or even making a decision. They fall into analysis paralysis, and you can see it. Have you ever gone through it yourself? Share in the comments. One of the things I want to do here is create a space for people to learn from each other. I know for a fact that somewhere in this space, there's someone who's going to be watching this episode and going to the comments and going to read something that's going to shift their thinking, that's going to motivate them to break the chains of fear and allow them to be leaders. Or even better yet, plant the seeds so if that time comes that they experience something like this, they know exactly what to do. I want to share with you 3 things to do. Because right now you need a strategy. We all need strategies on how to address this when it comes our way. So, pardon me, I'm going to look down at my notes. So, bear with me. So, number 1, focus on why. Before anything else, why did you, let's start from the beginning, dream of, want to be in a position of leadership? What was it that you were working towards? What was the reason that you were saying, that you said to yourself, I'm willing to take on the responsibilities of being the one? Because what ends up happening a lot of times, we forget that. I know I wanted to be a school leader the moment that I realized how much my principals, my teachers really did for me. I didn't really know. I just thought I went to school and I went through a process. But however, there were teachers, there were principals, assistant principals, Dr. Kenneth Crow, who was my principal in high school, uh, Mr. Valach, who was my assistant principal. In junior high school, Miss White, Miss Washington, junior high school, Mr. Bailey, junior high school. Mr. Searles, my geometry teacher. Mr. Harrison, my U.S. history teacher. Mr. Milliner, who was a young guy who was fresh out of Morehouse, who was a first year teacher teaching chemistry. And how all these people planted seeds in me when I was a young man with so much doubt in myself. And I didn't realize that these seeds were growing into a forest that would be set on fire, that would lead me into an amazing life as an educator. What is your why? Because if we have that very strong why, it's hard, especially if we keep it at the forefront of our thoughts, it's hard for anyone, any situation, to push us away from our why. And when we are pushed away from our why, if you keep it close enough and you remember what that is, then you tend to be pushed back towards center again. Number 2, find your tribe. If I hear someone else say that being a school leader is the loneliest job, I'm going to kick myself in my forehead. I'm serious. I'm just going to find a way to power in my forehead. Because how is it lonely if you're a high school principal and there's a middle school principal who's feeding kids to your school? If you're a middle school principal, how you get lonely when there is a elementary school principal who's feeding kids to your school, and there's a high school principal you're feeding into? Because at the end of the day, regardless of what grade band you're leading, there's a collective experience that's there. And not only that, there are people across your district, your city, your state, the country, who are going through exactly what you're going through. Why are you living in a cave? Why are you being afraid and saying, I don't want anyone else to know what I'm going through? The only way you become better and you survive and you thrive is by finding people, like-minded people who are willing to pour into you and let you know, hey, I've gone through this. Finding the elders in your tribe who say, hey, I'm retired, but this is how I handled it. Even those who are willing to tell you, hey, I shouldn't have handled it that way. If I could do it again, this is how I would do it. This is my advice to you. It's very important. And again, this is not just about education. It's in every field that's out there. Find a tribe of people who are in the same spaces that you're in, who are willing to pour into you and that you are willing to pour into them as well. And lastly, fail forward. Embrace failure. Because if you're expecting to do anything in life and thrive and be successful the whole way through without any failure, you must be immortal, I would like, I don't want to say God, but some kind of like, godlike creature that's perfect. Failure is part of the process. You're gonna make mistakes, and yes, there's gonna be people who are gonna back you and say, "Hey, I got you. Let's figure out a way around this." There's gonna be people out there who are gonna say, who will give you no grace whatsoever, and try to punish you for that one mistake. Accept that it's gonna happen, and stand 10 toes down and focus on making sure that you remember your why. And I'm telling you, most of the time it works out. And when it doesn't work out, it wasn't meant to be. It's not a slight on you. It is just the natural course of things. But fail forward, embrace failure, learn from your failures, and just get better. So let me ask you a question. Is there something in your life right now that has been holding you back? Is there something in your career that's holding you back? In your relationships that's holding you back? Because I think if you start from there, especially with that last strategy of failing forward, I think it could release you to be so much more than you are right now. So if you're willing to be brave, in the comments, share what that thing is. Share what that thing is. What is holding you back? You don't have to get into specifics. We could keep it general. But if you're brave enough to say, hey, it's exactly this, share it in the comments, and I guarantee you someone's going to read it and pour into you. And if it's not, if it's not someone else, definitely will be me. So here is my challenge to you. I'm trying to find the words to really make it as simple as possible. Do not let fear dictate your journey, your path, your purpose. Accept fear as that thing that's going to be there no matter what happens. It's going to be there. But how you choose to face it and push back against it and push through it is going to define the impact you have in this world. My uncle, who was a pastor in Los Angeles, was the first person that I heard use this acronym. And apparently this acronym has been around for a while. But I heard it from his lips. I'm going to share it with you. Fear is false evidence appearing real. F, false. E, evidence. A, appearing. And R, real. Often we create our own misery We believe that something exists and it's right there in the dark, the boogeyman. And we cower, we hide, we shake, our teeth gnash, and we're like, you know, completely overtaken by it. But it's not even real. We're fearing something that is so not even here and doesn't even exist out there because we conjure it. I'd rather have something happen than then I can say, what is this thing? It's right here in front of me. How do I handle it? And then move forward. Then sit here and then spend time, precious time that honestly we will never get back, worrying about that thing that hasn't even happened yet. It's very important. No matter what you do in this life, whether you're an educator, a principal, or you are in any other field in this life, or even in your relationships with your children, with your wife, with people, that you do not let fear dictate your existence. Folks, if you enjoyed this episode, please, 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 I don't need you to like or subscribe or to share. I need you to comment. I need you to engage in a conversation. I don't need a compliment, but I need you to share your story because, again, I think it's very important that people out there who are struggling know that they are not alone. I don't want to be the sole voice out there saying, "Yeah, I've gone through it and I've had my challenges." I want people to hear from many people, and it's not just educators. It's not just school principals. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're in. If you came across this episode and you made it to this point, share your perspective, share your story. It could be a one-liner, it could be a paragraph, but I think it's very important to we all hear from each other. Well, this is Uche Njoku, Sneaker Principal. I appreciate you giving the time to get through this episode of the Sneaker Principal podcast. You know, it's funny. I picked a title for my podcast that tongue ties me, but I like it so much I'm going to keep it. So again, the Sneaker Principal podcast. I'm Nigerian, and even though I sound like this in my head, I sound like this. So I'm struggling with sometimes putting the words together. So again, be well, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.